I'm Dr. Rob Myers. Welcome to CardioTalks. I'm a cardiologist at Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto. This is the second video in a two-part series about the management of aortic valve stenosis. In the first video, I talked about what it is, what causes it, what are the symptoms, how do we know you need the valve replaced. In this video, I'm going to briefly talk about the tests we do, and critically, I'm going to give you all the information you need to ask the right questions and ensure when your valve is getting replaced, it's at the right center. Why? Because there's 26 centers in Canada, about 700 in the United States. They're not all created equally. So the best test is an echocardiogram or echo or cardiac ultrasound. Usually by the time you go to a cardiologist, somebody's already made the diagnosis. Either they've done an echo, maybe they've heard a murmur, but sometimes I'll see people who have a murmur, no testing's done, tell them that they have it. So what does the echo show me? Well, remember, the valve looks like a Mercedes-Benz insignia. It has 3 equal cusps or leaflets. The echocardiogram will show me whether they're opening or closing well, and you can see from these images there's an open valve and a closed valve. This is like cutting off your head and looking straight down. Blood's coming up towards you. It's also going to allow me to calculate the valve area. And an aortic valve area tells me how narrow it is. Probably more important is how much pressure it takes to push the blood through the valve. It's like if the door isn't opening wide enough and people are squeezing through the door, you got to push with a lot more pressure if you want to get them through. So the pressure gradient, measured in millimeters mercury, who cares, is a really critical parameter to evaluate severity. Now we can also do a cardiac MRI. Typically not as easily accessible or available in Canada, doesn't give us that much more information. You can see from this image of an MRI, it looks about the same, 3 cusps or leaflets. So how are we going to replace it? Surgically or a transcutaneous aortic valve implantation or TAVI? The first person to think that this might be something that could be done through the leg was Henning Ruud Andersen, a Danish guy, 1989. He did it in a pig, probably multiple pigs, which was quite remarkable and an incredible concept. And in 2002, a Frenchman named Alain Cribier was the first person to put the valve in through the leg in a human being. The FDA didn't approve it till around 2012. And so now, for most patients, a TAVI has become the standard of care. You go in through the leg and you open up that valve like an umbrella. In general, it's lower risk, lower complications for you, a much easier period of convalescence. You might even go home the next day or the following day. Whereas with surgery, you're getting a sternotomy. Your sternum's being cut. You're getting put on a heart-lung bypass machine. It's like getting hit by a truck. Not that I've ever been hit by a truck or had heart surgery. And so every week I tell patients, look, it's a terrible flu with a lot of pain. You get better week to week. With a TAVI, you get better day to day. But not everybody should have a TAVI, and I'm going to go through who needs it. Now, the next test you're going to need would be a CT scan or CAT scan of your chest. That ensures that the TAVI is technically feasible. So surgical aortic valve replacement has a higher complication rate. Generally about 3% or so would be the mortality rate. Less than 1% if you're younger, but if you're an older person, you could have a mortality of 4 or 5%. That's a big deal. The TAVI offers a much better profile in most patients. So what's the process? The standard of care, at least in Canada, is within 2 weeks of receiving a referral, the specialized TAVI clinic will see you, and within a month of seeing you, you'll get all your testing done. The standard is whether it's surgical or a TAVI, your valve will be replaced within 3 months. Now remember, this is not an emergency. Typically, we're following you over a period of time. It's very rare somebody gets admitted to the hospital with severe congestive heart failure and they really need something done on a more urgent basis. So that 3-month period is not a long time to wait, as long as you're not exercising. If you have severe aortic valve stenosis and you have any symptoms, don't exercise. Do your regular activities of daily living, go to the store, walk your dog, assuming it's a small dog, but you shouldn't be doing too much. You should be doing nothing that makes you breathless. So where should you get a TAVI done once it's decided? And do you have a choice? Canadian guidelines are pretty good. They say that a TAVI center requires each individual person to do more than 50 per year. That's a lot. At Sunnybrook, we are one of the largest centers in Canada. We're doing about 520 a year. It's going up 5 to 7% every single year. Based on the number of people that are doing it, they're all doing more than 100 per year. In the United States, the standard is that your center should be doing more than 25 per year, let alone how many people are doing those 25. So in the same way, I don't want my heart transplant at some place that does 3 transplants a year. I don't want my TAVI in some place that does 50 a year and each person maybe does 10. Experience is everything. And so when your cardiologist is advising you to have a TAVI, these questions have to be answered. And if he or she doesn't want to answer them, you're in the wrong office. How many TAVIs are done in your hospital per year? How many do you do per year and how long have you been doing it? Experience is everything. And it can make the difference between a complication or a nice safe journey. There are 2 commercial valves available. There's the Evolute valve, which is a self-expanding valve. You put it in, it expands and crushes your own valve against the wall of the aorta. And then there's something called the Sapien valve, which a balloon expands. Now, there is a reason why we use each of these valves that you really should know. Generally speaking, an Evolute valve is not used as often as a Sapien, but it should be. Why? Well, first of all, in comparison, the Evolute valve is more durable. It has better numbers, less complications. You're likely to have that valve for a longer period of time. So if you're older in particular, the Evolute valve is the right valve for you, and most people are older now. Why? Well, whether you have a valve replaced surgically or whether you have it done through a TAVI, it's eventually going to fail. Now, there's an attrition rate. Some fail earlier than others. You should get at least 10 years out of it. If you're older, chances are you're going to die with the valve in place and not because the valve deteriorates. So we want the best possible valve. So why is the Sapien valve used more often in some places? Why isn't it mainly Evolute? Especially since most patients are older? It's easier to put in. So it's not quite as durable necessarily, but it's easier. That's a question you got to ask. So if I'm getting my valve put in, I want the guy that does 100, 150 every year and is very adept at putting in the Evolute, unless I'm younger. Now here's a subtle piece of information if you're younger. The Sapien valve, if you decide you're going to have a TAVI, which isn't always the best decision if you're, let's say, under 65, but if you're going to do it, the Sapien valve is probably the best valve for you. Why? Because as you get older and the valve fails, we can do a valve-in-valve procedure. So now your Sapien valve has failed and you're 79 years old, we can go in again and squeeze that valve. Open it up like an umbrella with a new valve. It's easier to do when you have a Sapien in place than an Evolute valve in place. However, generally speaking, older people are better served with Evolute valves in the right centers. Just because a Sapien is easier to put in doesn't mean it's the right decision. So in Canada, we have 2 people doing this. Every time you go in for the valve, you've got an interventional cardiologist and a cardiovascular surgeon. That brings all the right skills to the table. So what do you expect? Well, you get rolled into this cath lab. Looks like an operating room, but it isn't. Yeah, lots of cold machinery going beep, beep, beep. Everybody's dressed like surgeons, but it's all done through your leg. Now, 95% of the time, you have what's called conscious sedation. Just sort of means you don't get a tube in your throat, but there's an anesthetist making sure you're comfortable. About 5% of people get the tube in the throat, called intubation, where you're hooked up to a ventilator. 97% of people will have this done by accessing the artery of your leg, called the femoral artery. Just a simple access. A little less than 5% need a more complex access where it needs to be done surgically, or another artery, sometimes underneath the clavicles, for example, is required because the ones in the femoral region are too blocked. So how do we choose who gets what? Well, American and European guidelines say this. They say if you're under 65, you should have surgical aortic valve replacement. First of all, remember, most patients under 65 with aortic stenosis, it's from a bicuspid valve, very calcified, very thickened, can be a bit harder to do a successful TAVI, and they're going to need another procedure. They're definitely going to need another procedure. If you do it surgically, and I know nobody wants to get cut, but a mechanical valve can last forever. Problem is you need a blood thinner every day, and people don't want that. Now, between age 65 and 75, it can vary in terms of what the best procedure is. After age 75, TAVI is a standard of care. Now, remarkably, after a TAVI, if you're like the first case in the morning, you might even go home the same day. Typically, without any complications, you can go home the next day. So what are the impediments to going home? Well, we've gone in through your femoral artery, so you're not going to go home and run a marathon. First few days, you're generally going to sit on the couch and not do very much, and then gradually increase your exercise. Within a month or so, you should be doing whatever you want. Electrical problems can happen, which I'll explain, and so when you go home early, we'll put you on a heart rate monitor to capture anything that might indicate the need for a permanent pacemaker. So what are the main complications from this? About 5% of people have problems with the access, the femoral artery. They'll bleed too much, maybe they'll get a big collection of blood called a hematoma. Sometimes it tears or dissects and needs surgery. We can deal with this almost all the time, but it is a pain in the butt. The second complication that can happen, and anywhere from, let's say, around 10% as high as 20%, is the need for a permanent pacemaker. People get surprised by that, but here's why it happens. When that valve goes in and we squeeze it up against the aorta, it's very close to the main electrical site of the heart where electrical impulses are generated and propagated, and so we can damage that, and you end up requiring a permanent pacemaker. Look, compared to having the valve put in, it should be pretty minor. About 2 or 3%, unfortunately, will develop a stroke, not always critical or serious, and about 1% or less will have a heart attack. That's a terrible one, and it's because the valve can obstruct the little hole where the blood goes through into the coronary artery. Now be prepared for having a little bit of leakiness around the valve if it doesn't go up against the aorta as tightly as it should. Sometimes that is very, very severe. Whole procedure either needs to be redone or it needs to be done surgically. It's called a paravalvular leak, and we always monitor kidney function as well. So anywhere you have a medical or dental procedure, many of those procedures require antibiotic prophylaxis, which I know you've been told about if you've got your valve replaced. And that means you get antibiotics before and after. So that's what I think you need to know about a TAVI. If you've taken some notes and you have all the questions you need to ask, you will confidently go into that procedure, minimize the complications, and be prepared. I hope that helps.